Hello and welcome to Flex Education, where we're going to explore the world of demand-side response and flexibility with you, and hopefully impart a bit of knowledge and have some fun discussing this new and exciting area of the power market. My name's Ian Calvert. I'm the Chief Executive of the Association for Decentralised Energy. We've always represented auto-generators and particularly combined heat and power plants who have been particularly not well served by a system designed around central coal plants built in the north of England, doing bulk power transmission to consumers, or, as we'd call them then, in other parts of the UK. And with a really take it or leave it approach to supplying electricity people. And in this world, designed in the 1960s and 70s, we had an oversupply of fossil fuel plants from the, given to us by the Central Electricity Generating Board. And so the marginal, responding to the marginal demand, if you were to do a bit of demand-side response or flex your offtake, what you'd really be saving the system would be maybe a bit of coal, a bit of open cycle gas turbine running. But then came the pool in '89, an improvement on this where people got to see more commercial exposure for users. They could see half-hourly electricity prices, more people could access them. And we started to get a bit more of what you'll learn about here, demand-side response, with people accessing half-hourly prices for power and responding. That developed more through electricity market reforms and NETA, the new electricity trading arrangements 10 years later, which gave us triads. Triads drove, we might hear a little about them for a bit, gave a bit of reward for choosing when you take your power. But again, although it's been building slowly, the market. We're going to hear from some people here who are going to tell us that there's thousands of megawatts already being flexed. But this is small compared to what we're going to have in the future with the UK power market. We're going to have future energy systems with many, many generators, not just a handful of centrally dispatched generators. And these generators are going to be intermittent. They're going to be renewable, so they're going to be wind, solar, or a lot of them will be. We'll hear other generators are available, but in a net zero system, there'll be a lot of intermittent wind and solar. And so instead of just doing flexibility to save a bit of money on the edge, we're going to need to do it to deliver an operable net zero system, as well as giving commercial rewards to people that interact with the market. We're going to need to do it in order to not overspend and break the bank on extra transmission and distribution assets and generators with very low load factors. It's going to be key to keeping the system stable, delivering frequency response and all sorts of other ancillary services, inertia, for example, which we might hear a bit about in a minute, to make it work. So we're going to hear from a set of companies here that have a range of offerings across flexibility or demand-side response, from small to large. It's not new, but it is a fast-growing area, and we're going to hear about all their systems and the potential that they're going to bring to unlock demand-side response and deliver net zero without breaking the bank, which is what we're all about. So I'll introduce them in a minute, and then you can all sit back for a bit of Flex Ed, which we're going to deliver to you over the next hour and a quarter, or thereabouts. We've also got, as I introduce people, a Slido code here, an attempt to make it more interactive so that you at home can send your questions in. If you scan this QR code that you see now, you'll get taken through to Slido, and you'll be able to beam some questions into one of my colleagues who will then rebroadcast it to the panel, and we'll collate them and get those questions in. So start thinking of them now. All are welcome, from basic to really nerdy. We can cover them all with this panel. But first of all, we're going to go across the 5 companies. They're all going to present who they are and what they do, and then we'll dive into some Q&A after we've heard the full range of offerings, so that you can target your questions generally, or who you think best can answer it. So with no more from me, I'll introduce briefly the panel. We've got Duncan Dale from Statkraft, Irena from Ampex, Wendell from Open Energy, Alistair Martin from Flexitricity, and finally Michael Jenner from Semper at the end there. So first of all, I'm going to pass to Duncan Dale it's literally passing here. Here he goes, pass the control to Duncan Dale from Statkraft. Over to you, Duncan.
Thanks a lot, Ian. And thank you very much for having us here. And it's a real privilege to be here at COP26 and part of this amazing occasion. So my team is in Statkraft. So Statkraft is that going to work?
Right button.
Yeah. There we go. So Statkraft is Europe's largest renewable energy generating company. Its DNA is in 125 years of Norwegian hydro. We've got about 20 gigawatts of plant around the world, 65 terawatt hours of pure energy a year. And we've sort of grown from that base, and we're building 2 gigawatts of new wind and solar projects each year. But we're big traders as well. So we trade more than 3 million trades a year, several thousands of terawatt hours of underlying energy around the globe, with quite a big spec book. And what we have been doing on the flex side is, the areas I'd like to concentrate on with you is around aggregation of flexibility around Europe, and then also on inertia and greener grid parks, which are to do with dealing with the a lack of inertia on the system and storage. And then also to talk about PPAs, about actually managing renewable energy, which is a sort of negative flex that you need to compensate for. Statkraft's also in hydrogen, in Norway on chemical processing and steel, in providing green hydrogen to these projects. And through our IMC business, Bright, we are aggregating behind the meter flexibility too, but I don't plan to touch on that too much. What we've done over the last several years is built a trading system, which we've branded Unity. And what this does, it pulls together renewable energy from lots of different sources around Europe, the German, the UK, Spanish, French, and we're going into the Italian market as well, and trades it in real time into the day ahead, the intraday, and into the balancing market. And we've aggregated 20,000 megawatts of third-party energy into that trading portfolio. And what it does, it also switches on and off wind farms in real time based on what's going on in the energy market, but pulls in storage, electric vehicles, all different sorts of flexibility to balance and optimize between them. And as part of this, we built artificial intelligence programs that balance the wind in real time. It requires vast amounts of data to deal with day-ahead forecasts, the intraday forecasts, and then rebalancing that, and thousands of trades. So we built robots that trade these markets, that have different styles of trading, and then they also interleave the trades into the marketplace to do it in the most effective way. And that makes us one of the largest, or the largest, spot traders, both in the UK and the German markets. Over the last 3 years, we've been building our flex business, both in the UK and Ireland. And to give you an idea of the scale, it's currently about 1,000 megawatts or so. And what this does, it optimizes both wholesale market optimization as you go from day ahead into real-time delivery, ancillary service income, and support that's required for the distribution system and the transmission system. So it revenue stacks between all of these different areas and chooses the best markets to put those trades into. And kind of what it's doing as it goes along is it's delta hedging the option on each of the plant that's there, and it allocates the trades to a specific asset class so that there's no cross-trading or pulling up another asset because one isn't performing properly. What we try to do, or what we aim to do here, is create a bigger cake and have superior optimization, so there's more value to share. And we also provide floors as well, long-term floors, to enable parties to get financing. And we see that there are that there's an allegory here between how chess evolved. So you used to have Garry Kasparov, greatest chess player ever, arguably, and then eventually beaten by Deep Blue, a computer built by IBM. And but apparently best in class now is a combination of humans and computers. And that's where we think the trading's going. So you go from super traders to automatic trading, but our opinion is that the best thing is to have automated trading where you let the robots get on and do the basic stuff, supervised by expert traders. The other area that we're developing through our project development are greener grid parks. Here are 4 examples, two in the UK and 2 in Ireland. And they're a combination of battery storage, which I think a number of us will talk about as we go through this panel. But what's different about this area is we have grid stability projects, which are basically enormous bits of metal that create inertia for the system. So as more and more fossil plant is retired, to enable the plant to run on zero carbon, you need inertia and a frequency response to deal with a zero carbon system. And these projects, they're about the size of houses, 250 tons, rotating at 3,600 times per second to create that inertia for the system. And then finally, I wanted to talk about negative flexibility. So we have a PPA business, 4,200 megawatts in the UK. Now the problem with them, and so we balance this in real time going into the marketplace. We've got 240 contracts there. But the problem with this business, as with the system as a whole, is its negative flexibility. What do you do when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't there? What do you do when there's just far too much wind on the system and it exceeds demand? And that will lead to, I think, some of the questions I hope we will go on to answer as a panel as we go through this subject. Things like, where's the storage going to come from when you've got a 5-day cold period? How can you manage that? How are we going to manage the low voltage system as we go through time with vast amounts of embedded generation and lots of flexible consumption too? And then how do you deal with a zero carbon system? So I look forward to answering that with my colleagues here as we go through time here. Thank you. Back to you, Ian.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Duncan. And next, we're going to, before we go to Wendell third, next we're going to hear from Irena from Ampex. Over to you.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for pronouncing my name correctly, which is always a privilege in this country. So Irene Di Martino, I lead Ampex, which was established about 2 years ago as a fully owned subsidiary of AMP Energy. AMP Energy is a North American headquartered renewable energy infrastructure owner and operator. And we got established with quite an ambitious vision, I have to say, which resonates, I'm sure, with everything that you'll hear in this panel today. But we effectively had a mission to address the key challenges which are associated with this unprecedented energy transition that we are all living through. And just to set the context, I thought I'd run through what the challenges actually are that we're trying to address. So, as Duncan just said, we're witnessing an unprecedented level of decentralization, and this is basically associated with the increased presence of distributed energy resources at the edge of the grid. We've got electrification of heat and transport, which translates into EVs and heat pumps at the edge of the grid, and that is actually resulting in voltage instability, which is one of the biggest headache, if not the single biggest headache of network operators. With the decommissioning of spinning reserves of fossil plants that are being decommissioned, we're seeing lack of inertia in the system. We've got frequency instability And with extreme weather conditions, we're also facing blackouts and brownouts, so the grid is becoming less and less resilient. And on top of all of that, there is imperative agenda item for network and system operator in keeping cost of infrastructure upgrades contained. So flexibility clearly is at the top of the agenda of system and network operators, but it has also become a top agenda item for technology providers like AMPEX, because there cannot be any net zero achieved without flexibility. I'm a big advocate of that, and so I absolutely echo what Ian said at the beginning. And in order to avoid expensive network reinforcements, non-wire alternatives are being looked at with increasingly more interest. And when we think of non-wire alternatives, clearly we've got battery storage, but we also have demand response. Demand response because we need to shape and shape the peak demand in order to have capacity that can cater with the presence of all these many EVs, all these many heat pumps, and the batteries, both at residential and grid scale level. And if we look at some of the figures that I've put on the right-hand side of this slide, just to really substantiate why there is a need for flexibility, there are some meaningful stats on that quoted. We've got a predicted 8 billion savings by 2030 just through enhanced flexibility. Those are consumer savings. And looking at what is quoted as presence of DERs across Europe at the moment is about 200 gigawatts. So if we just think of the scale of that, and we're not saying that the entirety of 200 gigawatts is going to be unlocked as flexibility, but even looking at 20 gigawatts of monetizable flexibility, of which today only 1.5 is being used. So that already really tells us that there is a huge level of untapped flexibility behind the meter. That clearly is going to become a need. Currently it's a challenge, but it needs to turn absolutely into an opportunity for us to deliver that net zero agenda. So AMPEX decided to take a whole system approach because we wanted to avoid point solutions simply because the complexity of the challenges is so big that we decided to look transversely at the grid. And this is why we've been developing a disruptive state-of-the-art digital energy platform that caters for a number of interoperable offerings that you see on this slide, and I'll walk you through what they are. They include a smart transformer, a virtual power plant solution, a demand-side management solution, and all these three actually pave the way to a transactive platform, because we firmly believe that the grid will get fully transactive in years to come when the regulatory hurdles have been overcome, in order to create local virtual marketplaces where both producers and consumers are able to actively contribute not only to source electricity at the lowest possible price and being greener, because we know that increasingly more there is a consciousness in the consumers to want to be greener, but effectively they will be the main contributors, the main players into essentially providing stability and flexibility to the grid. So our focus is the edge of the grid, because we envisage that due to the decentralization and the digitalization and the democratization to become the locus of provision of system stability and flexibility. So we're effectively reversing the top-down approach which has governed the grid for over 100 years. We want to get to a bottom-up approach, which we believe is actually going to be a need. So virtual power plant, everybody familiar in this panel, I'm sure even the audience, with what the virtual power plant solution is. AMPEX is present in North America in a number of AMP assets, optimizing the dispatch and the management of battery and solar generation. And the proprietary approach of the VPP that AMPEX has developed is the fact that the system architecture is fully scalable in order to cater for a transactive grid eventually. And clearly we not only optimize the dispatch of those assets to cater for different market conditions, but we also asset life manage those assets. The demand side management solution instead is the one where we truly have put a discriminator in the solution, in that we got autonomy at the heart of our platform. And autonomy really allows us to have machine learning based algorithms that are essentially delivering a decentralized control system architecture that enables unlocking flexibility at a large scale, but having the contribution of individual devices, individual nodes, whether they are consumptive nodes or generating nodes, in order to absolutely get demand-side management at an unprecedented scale. And this is, again, because we believe that behind the meter has to play a key role into providing flexibility. But we also have put ourselves into the mind of consumers that need to embrace the technology in order to effectively get to that point of large-scale demand-side management. So we have been developing a user-centric autonomous energy management system, not only thinking of main loads. There's clearly a big attention and focus on residential batteries or even behind-the-meter batteries of a bigger scale, on EVs increasingly more so. But we know that eventually we need to deliver an energy-as-a-service solution that is absolutely headache-free for consumers, because we need to move away from the reliance on human behavior to be repeatable and consistent in order to deliver flexibility from each and every node at the edge of the grid. And in order to do that, we need to deliver a technology-aided solution which encompasses a whole set of devices, a whole set of even appliances which are accretive, they're small, but eventually will be what allows the onboarding of consumers on a vast scale. So Ampex has developed a proprietary digital energy assistant, which we branded ALICE. ALICE stands for Agent for Lifestyle-Based Intelligent Control of Energy. And actually, ALICE is housed in a behind-the-meter box which communicates with our advanced data analytics, which is cloud-hosted. And what ALICE does is, by the way, is live in the Energy Systems Catapult Living Lab as I speak. It's been live for a number of months. So we've got real users that are independent from Ampex. They have been trialing our product. And what ALICE does is it interfaces with the users on one side and learns about the user's needs, the user's preferences. What it also does do, thanks to our advanced analytics, it understands the needs of the grid in real time. There is price forecasting combined with a number of other data that are all taken into account in order to understand what's the optimal schedule for loads to be shaped dynamically in real time to unlock flexibility. So again, ALICE is the gateway for that flex that comes from the edge of the grid and then serves the purpose or the objective of aggregator and in turn also network operators, especially in local flexibility markets. The one piece of disruptive technology the Ampex has also developed, and this is absolutely uniquely placed to actually enable another important transition that we're witnessing in the energy sector, and that is the distribution network operator becoming distribution system operator, and that is the smart transformer. So the smart transformer is a proprietary product of Ampex, is essentially a drop-in replacement for conventional transformer. It's got an onboard autonomous processor that enables the transformer to act intelligently. Is going to be placed in a number of distribution network substations. It's actually going live in the UK in Q1 2022 with one of the DNOs. It has already been tested and proven in terms of what it's meant to be doing. And what it does address is a number of challenges that are associated with increased presence of DERs. And by that I mean that the smart transformer is able to dynamically modulate voltage, so it caters for voltage instabilities, resolving those. It also optimizes power factor, which means it makes the transportation of electricity more efficient on grid. It suppresses or compensates for harmonics. And the other thing that it does, which is incredibly important for DNOs, I was 2 days ago listening to UKPN talking at COP, is it enables for enhanced and indeed better than it currently is visibility in the distribution network. And it does so because it's equipped with a number of sensors on board. So not only does it resolve grid constraints locally, but the smart transformer, once it's deployed as a fleet, it addresses the need for the DSO to be able to contribute to flexibility, because the smart transformer is able to instantly change its load by approximately 6%, and that equates to up to 3.6 gigawatts on a fleet if there was a 10% penetration in the distribution network. And you quickly realize that as we speak of decommissioning fossil-based generators, having a non-wire alternative, which is actually intrinsic in a substation piece of hardware that has been so far unable to cater for inertia, is highly disruptive. So a number of these will go live on grid, and hopefully after that be embraced at scale and become actually an active contributor to flexibility itself, as well as improving the level of feasibility at the distribution level, because this has been almost a blind spot historically for the lack of sensors in substations. Quite an expensive undertaking, actually, if you think about it. But because the smart transformer comes equipped with a number of many sensors, and it samples a high frequency, the data which are to do with power quality are then processed by our advanced analytics, and the output that is given to network operators effectively allow them to not only plan robustly for events in real time, but to actively manage their network. So we know that active network management is at the center of agenda of DNOs, so this is why this technology is regarded as disruptive and game-changing. So I wanted to conclude by stating what we see as the market being in 2030, since we're all racing towards 2030 for net zero. And as I said, to us, flexibility from behind the meter is going to play a key role. We are going to see innovative business model that actually we believe our technology itself is going to enable, where we see a number of different stakeholders playing together, from aggregators, retailers, and consumers. We need a consumer-centric approach, and we need technology to aid that. So Ampex by 2030 will have contributed to unlocking flexibility from the edge of the grid at a large scale through the DSM, but it's also poised to really be disruptive with the smart transformer, helping enhance grid visibility, active network management, and hopefully a bigger contribution into local flexibility market from DNOs that currently obviously have not had that role. Thank you for having me on this panel.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Irene. There's so much that you've covered there. So solutions, building on the chess computer models we have from the right through to Alice in your house, and then hardware with the smart transformers. Excellent that this is coming along, because we need it now, as you say, because of the 2030 target. Next, we have Wendell from Open Energy, who might bring us some more solutions in the land of software.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So just quickly to introduce myself, so I'm Wendell Hortop, Senior Strategy Analyst at Open Energy. And yeah, I think it's been great to be up here during COP as part of the AD delegation. It's kind of been quite eye-opening in various ways. But I think what is kind of probably best to start with is to just introduce who Open Energy are. It's kind of quite a complicated space where we see kind of clean tech and sort of loads of other buzzwords come through. But really, what we see ourselves as is a kind of technology platform which is trying to just use the power of sort of AI and sort of advanced automation to maximize the benefit we can have in this sort of transition to net zero. And so, you know, how can we support investment in low carbon infrastructure through just being a technology platform, which we are. Open Energy has actually kind of got quite a long storied history in the flexibility space. We're potentially one of the most experienced flexibility providers, potentially globally, where we've been providing flexibility for over 10 years, which is a very long time in this sort of this transition we've seen. So, you know, at the beginning of that 10 years, we were sort of optimizing industrial refrigeration at Sainsbury's supermarkets across the UK. Maybe 5 years ago, the focus switched to larger industrial assets such as bitumen tanks, so using that kind of thermal store capability to dynamically provide frequency response. But then much more recently, as the market has shifted, so have we, and so we've kind of really shifted our focus through to storage, because that, you know, with the price of reductions we've seen through the pickup of electric vehicles, that has really taken over the flexibility market, which could be a good or bad thing, we'll see. But yeah, we've sort of shifted with that market to change our offering. But the thing which underpins all of this is our sort of dynamic demand 2 platform, which is a sort of cloud-based optimization platform, which just it optimizes schedules and dispatches flexible assets. So yeah, we've had it dispatching a sort of range of things from sort of storage to bitumen tanks, refrigeration. And it also then collects all that data, provides it back to us, and allows us to kind of provide that in quite a sort of powerful data visualization format on our console. On the right-hand side of the slide, we've got kind of this sort of a more brief history of open energy, where we've had quite a few what we see as first, so kind of the first sort of battery storage pre-qualified for providing FFR in the UK. Which now, we've got over 1 gigawatt of storage providing that in this country. So, even though the first one was maybe only 100 kilowatts or so, it's quite nice to sort of have a part in playing that in that sort of progression. I think the biggest thing on this history, which is probably for us, it kind of sets our path forwards from here, is the acquisition by BP, which happened in July of this year. I think what's quite exciting for us is that this was done through the sort of launch platform, and that leaves us entirely independent. So we can still, and we still are kind of just progressing exactly as we were before, but we can leverage the considerable resources at BP's disposal, while still trying to not kind of have the sort of bear hug, as quite a lot of people there sort of call it. I think really that's quite exciting for us as we look to really grow. So one of our focuses is next year kind of providing our first integrated trading solution with BP, and then also to expand internationally. So we'll have our first project going live in Australia early in 2022, fingers crossed. So just to go back to that point about what is dynamic demand 2, I'll try to kind of summarize this kind of chart in something quite simple. So it's a cloud-based platform where we're taking in a sort of whole host of different inputs. So we have sort of market forecasts coming from our trading partners or from our own forecasting. We've got demand and sort of generation forecasts. We have actual physical data being provided to us from the asset, and all of this is fed into our optimization platform, which sort of creates the optimal schedule at any point in time to send to the asset. And we do this kind of at various time stages approaching real time, and really that just fits into the various decision gates we see which are in place as we look to optimize assets. So this sees us sort of making decisions at day ahead as we bid into various grid services markets or into the day ahead market. After that, we can re-optimize and then come up with a new solution, which is based upon, okay, what contracts have we got in place? And then this kind of progresses through to real time, where we're bidding into the balancing mechanism, and then finally actually just dispatching the asset in the most optimal way. And so yeah, to maybe go into a little bit more technical detail, so what kind of really makes our offering so powerful, and I think has really pushed forward our capabilities on not just sort of behind the meter, but also the grid scale assets we manage. It's this sort of combination of this cloud-based platform with our sort of local control hardware, and these are physical assets we're operating. There's sort of there's always a need to be sort of taking stock of what is going on at the asset. So this could be kind of temperature. It could be what is the site demand on like a behind the meter solution, and so we. From Dynamic Demand 2, we're sending these sort of schedules to the asset. However, the local control then takes control of it and can tailor that solution based upon what is actually happening on site. And I think that is kind of what's underpinned our capabilities in the behind the meter space, but also in providing kind of very advanced solutions on sort of front of meter, bigger assets. I think it kind of went on. Oh, yeah, there was a brief sort of glimpse of this in the previous slides, but really Open Energy now have kind of quite a focused view of what we're going to kind of progress our development with going forwards, which I think it fits in very well with what BP see as their aims to invest in themselves as they kind of have their own net zero transition. So the kind of bulk of this at the moment for us is in battery storage. As I said, this is just where the market is. It's just driven by these cost savings we've seen. But then we also are active across electric vehicle optimization. So we're part of the Power Leap project, where we are optimizing now a fleet of over 150 vehicle to grid, providing vehicles in the southeast of the UK. So that's with like Octopus Energy, UKPN, and a few other partners. We're also active with the optimization of electrolyzers. So again, we are working quite closely with ITM Power to optimize a sort of fleet of electrolyzers which are used to refuel, like vehicle refueling across the UK. So that's part of the H2ME project. And then finally, if we like think a bit bigger in terms of renewable generation, we're also kind of looking at how can we provide some smarter curtailment solutions, like smarter constraint management, which is going to be a bigger and bigger issue as we build more and more renewables. I think maybe one thing that kind of sets us apart from a few of the others in this space is that we have sort of made quite an active decision to focus entirely ourselves as a technology company, and therefore we do not sort of have we decide to kind of work with trading partners who then will trade that energy. What this kind of means is that we can focus all of our development on sort of advancing our sort of automated optimization, on advancing kind of how we control the assets we manage, and creating the kind of optimal schedule to send to the asset. But we do not then have to kind of carry well, not necessarily baggage, but the kind of regulatory requirements to sort of manage that trading, to have that kind of the credit requirements which underpin that, the cash that kind of has to be flowing, especially as we look to manage bigger and bigger assets. And so yeah, really that's, I don't know, it feels like that's kind of quite unique for us in the industry, and it's helped. So we've been working with Vega Energy to optimize the assets in our portfolio to date, but then we will also look to integrate with BP to grow further. And I think another area where this really helps us is when we're looking at growing internationally. We can sort of carry our technology platform across with us. However, then we can integrate with parties on the ground who have much more experience of trading in those markets, who are already set up with, there's a lot of barriers through regulation and policy in this space, and so we can work with people who are already set up and able to provide sort of that trading element. I think what we have seen this is able to do is kind of deliver very high performance through us being able to focus entirely on providing the sort of optimization of these assets. We've sort of over the last year, which has been the last few months, definitely have been a pretty complicated time to manage batteries. And we've just seen that this has really helped us to sort of very quickly develop our offering as the market has shifted. So, in September, which was, I think, probably the most complicated month for optimization we've had maybe ever in this country, there was sort of record wholesale prices at the beginning of the month. Then we've had sort of a complete shift in the procurement methodology for grid services by National Grid. And through all of this, we were able to really just very quickly, day to day, make iterative changes to our product in order to kind of maximize the benefit we're able to produce with the assets we have across this period. And I think we really see this kind of continuing as this market, I think, has now entered, in the UK at least, the kind of next stage, which I think a few of us have probably been expecting for a while, where trading and sort of co-optimization with other services is going to really underpin what most flexible assets are doing in this space for the next 10, 20 years, which will carry us through to sort of that net zero future we hope to get to.
Thank you, Wendell. Obviously, it's quite an exciting area, this, and you can hear different approaches from the different companies so far. They're all quite different, but complementary. Next, we're going to hear from Alistair Martin from Flexitricity, and I'll blow his trumpet a bit first because he's a long-standing expert in flex. I say that because he's on the board of the ADE, and therefore makes sure that I represent the flex and demand-side response industry as best as can, and as an organisation. So thank you, Wendell, and over to Alistair from Flexitricity.
Thanks, Ian. and you're doing an amazing job at it. But I think both Wendell and I would disagree with one thing you said at the start, which is that flexibility is young. Demand-side flexibility, decentralized flexibility is what we're all really talking about here. So we founded in 2004 at Flextricity, operationally live 2008. So depending how you count it, let's take the operational date. Flexibility is, decentralized flexibility is choosing its GCSEs now. It's already going into town on its own. It's growing up. So we've been in the flexibility space since we were founded, and we're at 640 megawatts. We're 24 hours in terms of operations. We make heavy use of automation and machine learning, and I think you see that in common. I think the importance of both positive and negative variations as you deal with both plant shortfalls and the converse, low demand and high renewables. We're very busy. There's a lot going on. So I'll crack straight in and simply say this is the context in which we think we're working. We're going from the large, chunky things to the small, nimble things. And the reason we're doing that, the reason we care about decentralized flexibility is because small assets move quickly and they provide value directly to the consumer. They don't incur a cost in being ready, in being available, whereas the fossil assets do. They don't come in big, large, brittle lumps, whereas the nuclear assets do. And so they're absolutely essential. I probably mistitled the picture on the left. I think we want to call that snowman Hinkley C. It's large. It took a long time to build, and it's really hard to shift if you need to. You can shuffle the guys on the right as often and as much as you want. Just a wee intro. So every electricity market has to deal with the question of how you balance a market where you're selling electricity as a commodity but delivering it as an event. And the GB market does it in its own way. It's no weirder than anywhere else. The buyers, the users of energy are represented mainly by suppliers and sometimes by themselves who buy electricity in the forward markets and then tune as they go through towards real time. And then we have this point called the gate at which all trading is then in the hands of National Grid. And now we've started to fettle this system over the years. The capacity market, which I clicked through there, is a means of guaranteeing participation in these markets. That's a change. We have reserve and response auctions, which were probably not in the minds of the officials who designed the 2001 NITA arrangements, but they came in straight away. The grid also trades. They trade backwards into the market. And in fact, the gate itself, this cast iron barrier between trading openly and trading with grid, well, that leaks now. Within certain rules, people trade right up to real time. When you get close to real time, reserve dispatch occurs. That happens from the system operator's point of view. And then as real time unfolds, you'll also have frequency response delivering. And finally, I won't go into this, but it's a huge area. There's the question of paying for it all. So how is flexibility doing? How is decentralized flexibility doing in this space? And I've just shoved some ticks and crosses to show how I think it's doing. Broadly, pretty good. And that's my main message, is that the present arrangements are working. They've moved a long way in recent times. That's why they're working. It's not by standing still. But there are some things that we can move forward with that would improve the picture. Just a wee canter through some of the asset types that we work with. Aberdeen Heat and Power on the top left. They get on with their day job, but they're also paid to provide capacity into the capacity market. If I pick out on the bottom right, Norrish cold stores, they can respond in a few minutes to a grid instruction, which we will deliver to them, and they can keep the chiller plant off for a couple of hours with no problem at all. On the left, batteries associated with a food wholesaler, that's Philip Dennis Food Service, who have quite an interesting approach to energy and to energy cost risk. They've got renewable energy of their own as well, which allows them to manage that cost risk. And over the last few months, they must be among those who are feeling quite good about their forward choices about how they deal with energy. But we take those batteries and we play them into the markets that are doing best at the time, which frequency response has been one of them, balancing mechanism, forward trading. And what's coming now is on the domestic side is electric vehicle charging, which is just breaking through now. What do we do with these? We deal with events. Some events are big. This was a big one. But I stopped counting at the events we've delivered to when we reached 15,000. Things happen every day, and it's just impossible to simply pick them out and say they're representative. Most of them you don't see, but some of them you do. We work with combined heat and power. We were the first to take CHP into the balancing mechanism. This is a district energy plant. And you can forward trade there, so the red line is forward commitments that plant has made, day ahead in fact, so not that far forward. And you can see Grid has been tweaking what they've done in terms of generation on and off as they've needed more power. This is quite an important aspect of it, but if you take a faster asset into the balancing mechanism like a battery, it positively fizzes with activity. Things happening all the time. Now, as I said, and I think as Wendell said, batteries have not just been doing the balancing mechanism lately. They're also in frequency response and they're also in the forward markets. So this isn't all they do, and in fact, there's been less of this. There's been much more in the realms of frequency response. Just to bring it home to everyone, when a large lump of power disappears from the system, like the Nemo interconnector to Belgium did not so long ago, you get big frequency swings. Frequency swings lead to blackouts if they're too large or too fast. So frequency response is very important. I've put Gateshead district heating, district energy on the slide as well, because immediately after that event, Gateshead will have received a call to continue to fill the gap that's still there, and that will have been good money for them. This is obviously something that we sometimes forget to mention, but it's the key. The customers, the energy users are in this because it's worth it for them, primarily financially. So what would I do? What is my letter to Santa? What would I like to change? On the top left, on district energy, I would like to see a firmly detailed heat policy come forward. And I'd like it to include large-scale heat pumps, because everything that a CHP can do, a large-scale heat pump can also do, but backwards. Not in high heels, so not quite like Ginger Rogers, but it's the counterpart to district energy to the CHP, and on in the middle there, an area which has probably underperformed over the years in flexibility would be commercial buildings. There is now an emerging ability for these assets to gain access to ad hoc flexibility markets. Ad hoc is key. These are ad hoc assets. They don't consume all the time. So those are emerging. We're going to a lot of meetings on behalf of customers to make this work. And we are breaking through. Some of it's done. There's lots more to do. For batteries, pretty good, actually. If there's one ask, it would be an end to the mandatory frequency response market. That's National Grid. It's a bit of a geeky point, but it's about making sure all markets are fully open. On the domestic side, half-hourly settlement of customers is key. Not all, apparently half-hourly tariffs are actually half-hourly when you look underneath the bonnet. Making those half-hourly is very important. And we're asking suppliers to step up ahead of the regulations there and open that up properly. And I'll just jump to the bottom right there. The other area that's key for development to me is in the distribution networks. There is huge opportunity. There is activity there. We have Picoflex and Interflex and other activities, and Electron and Orkney, who are pushing things forward in the distribution networks. But what we really need is for the procurement practices that National Grid has developed over many years to be echoed in the distribution networks with continuous rolling procurement, which is the kind of procurement that customers can align to and can work with. So that's where we would ask things to move. I noticed that UK Power Networks has done or volunteered to do the thing that I most want to see happen, which is the unbundling of system operations from network ownership in the distribution side, following transmission, which is a great thing. I'll just close here with this slide that is now already out of date. This was an ambitious plan for decarbonisation that National Grid described. They didn't claim, they described it during the summer. And this has already been overtaken by the government's plan for decarbonisation of electricity. It's going further and faster, and it will need more flexibility to make it work and to get us to net zero. And that is where I'll stop. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alistair. A lot in that, entertainingly presented as well. I think your letter to Santa might be on its way partly to Ofgem, because I noticed they're responding with their full chain flexibility initiative, which is attempting to help Flex get access and be rewarded for the economic benefits it does and can provide. You also mentioned heat networks there, with both combined heat and power plants and heat pumps. And I mentioned that because the ADE is obviously the Trade Association for Heat Networks as well as Flex. And the ADE delegation has been here in Glasgow, visiting a few assets over the last couple of days, including we've seen at the Commonwealth Games site here for the 2014, multi-megawatt gas engines responding to the heat network demands there. And also, just recently, the excellent Glasgow Queen's Quay, where you've got multi-megawatt heat pumps taking heat from the Clyde and distributing that to thousands of houses, with thermal stores on the systems as a cheap way of storing energy, which obviously you exploit by flexing the demand and then the running time of the heat pumps. And we saw these multi-megawatt heat pumps coming on and off to feed that system. It's very interesting. But anyway, I digress. We've got to pass now to Semper. So I'll pass the thing around. Yeah, over to you to Michael for Semper and power flexibility and beyond.
Great, thanks so much, Ian. So I'll try and keep this short so we can get on to the questions, as I'm sure everyone wants to. Semper is a global utilities company, so we operate in many geographies. We've got a huge shift on at the moment to try and get to 10 gigawatts of renewables by 2025, and then we're going to continue on from there. But as far as the UK is concerned, we're about 1 gigawatt at the moment, and that's split across batteries, fast response gas engines, energy from waste, biomass, and also we've got some combined heat and power, so we're quite diverse, and we've also got some exciting prospects coming up, which I'll touch on in a moment. On the slide at the moment is our Teesside on the top right. That's our Teesside site in the north. That's called Wilton International. That's where we have our biomass and energy from waste plants, and that's where our combined heat and power system is. And we supply large industrials with their utilities. And on the left, you'll see a kind of diagram of where our distributed gas engines are and our batteries. So we've got Wilton in the north looking after industrials, and then we've got assets spread across England and Wales on the distribution system, which are fast response. So Alistair's already explained batteries and what they can do with frequency response and load shifting. And our gas engines, they respond in about 2 minutes to the needs of the grid. So they ramp up and ramp down very quickly, and they've been in action a lot recently, as some of my colleagues have already said. Also worth mentioning at Teesside is that there's a lot of potential for decarbonisation leadership there. So our site is on the area now designated as the East Coast Cluster. So that's one of the first two CCUS clusters that the UK has designated. We're also part of the newly established Freeport zone in the northeast. So we've got a huge opportunity there to make investment happen into the area, but decarbonised investment. So there are a number of companies in that area which we're working with to look at hydrogen solutions, blue hydrogen, but also green hydrogen. We've also, we've got the salt caverns that are already there to store that hydrogen once it's created. So it's a real great opportunity we've got in the northeast to be a decarbonisation crucible, as many have called it. So that's an example of our batteries. Each site that we have is about a 20 megawatt site. We've got one large 50 megawatt site coming online very soon, and we're going to plan on continuing that build out because the need for batteries is really, really crucial here in the UK. What I want to just spend a moment on is this diagram here. This is called Whitetail Clean Energy. So on top of our other assets, which we already do a lot of flex, this is a first-of-a-kind technology which we're looking at building on Teesside. We're doing that with 8 Rivers Capital, and it's using the Allen-Fetvet cycle. So it's akin to a gas engine, but instead of using air, you burn it with pure oxygen. And you use the supercritical, a very, very hot CO2, to turn the turbines. And what that then does is that makes the CO2 carbon capture ready. So as I've already mentioned, up on Wilton, we're part of the East Coast Cluster, where there'll be a transport and storage network there for captured carbon. This technology, it's a 300 megawatt plant. It will capture the carbon after it goes around the cycle many times, and then it's ready to go into the CCUS system. So this will be a flex asset for us, we hope, because it's 300 megawatts, but say it's at half load, supplying all of the industrial customers in the area with clean fuel, because all the carbon is captured. It has the ability then to flex up to 300 megawatts very, very quickly when it's needed on the grid. So what we see is a future whereby we've got, I know Alistair's mentioned everything should be small scale. Well, this is actually a larger scale, but will also still be flex. So there'll be a need for a lot of the small scale, which we've already got. But there'll also be some of these larger scale assets, but they will be able to capture the carbon. And that's our vision for the area, that we bring all that together to underpin the renewables, because on our site up at Wilton, that's where all the Dogger Bank offshore winds farms are landing. And that's a great potential for green hydrogen there, but there's got to be something to underpin it. So we're hoping to build that infrastructure to make sure the renewables growth can continue. I think I'll stop there and hand back.
Thanks, Michael. And that's there's some sort of twist there with using carbon dioxide as the working fluid in a turbine as part of a carbon dioxide reduction system somewhere. Pretty space age high tech program there, but obviously you that's for the future. But you're doing a lot of good stuff with flex right now. Anyway, we've got about just less than 30 minutes. We've got 30 minutes now, top, before we wind up before 11 o'clock to get some questions and a bit of debate going, because I do detect already slight differences of angle between the panel and focus, which we can explore, which might give a bit of fun here and learning. Do we have any Slido questions coming in?
We have questions.
Where
will storage come from?
Right, okay, we have questions. Thank you. The question there coming in is, where will storage come from? So we've heard, blue this, green that, and batteries. So where will storage come from? Who wants to open that? Duncan.
I'll try and open it if that's all right, Ian, and try and put it into context. Storage is massively important. I think with solar and wind, we've got the lowest cost of generation that's going. So it's the answer to climate change, and it gives you the answer to the trilemma. You've got local generation, so security of supply. You've got the lowest cost, and it's zero carbon. But there is still an issue around what happens when the wind doesn't blow for 6 days. So you need somewhere to store it. Batteries will do you a couple of hours, 4 hours, something like that. Maybe you can put it into heat, but the big hope really is around hydrogen, and that could be blue hydrogen, Mike, or it could be green hydrogen. I think the FES studies are really good. NGC have done tremendous work, I think, in the future energy scenarios, and you kind of got 4 scenarios. You've got the steady progression, which is a bit of waffling around and not really getting anywhere. You've got consumer transformation, which is, I think, what you would really like, Arena, sort of consumers doing an awful lot more and reacting to prices more than before. System transformation, which is really around blue hydrogen. And then you've got leading the way, which is green hydrogen and lots more of everything. And that's the one that gets you there the fastest. So that scenario I find really interesting, because you've got a lot of, you've got in the different scenarios, 30 to 60 gigawatts of solar build, 30 to 60 gigawatts of wind blow, and you've got, you know, the demand on the system goes from 60, say, to 90 gigawatts. So what do? You've got to store that energy somewhere, so make it into hydrogen. That's one way, but you need some form of getting there as well, and earlier, maybe blue hydrogen. You've got these clusters, and you can join the clusters together to take the carbon dioxide out and stick it in a big hole somewhere. So maybe a combination of the two. You know, Dogger Bank, bringing green hydrogen in, and then carbon dioxide going out into holes in the ground, and possibly even things like green ammonia coming in from, you know, from the Sahara. Big solar projects making green ammonia and then bringing it in by ship to different countries. But hydrogen is, we suspect, is the answer. But there's a lot we need to do to make this all work.
I'd like to add to what Duncan said.
Raina.
I don't think there's any disagreement in the role of hydrogen as an energy carrier, and I also see, as you said, the blue hydrogen being the interim stage to more green hydrogen. I think, though, that there's a trend which is, I think, incentivized by the regulation that are coming into place around, and the incentives around, you know, the EVs uptake, residential batteries. We're not seeing it necessarily this much in the UK, but we are seeing in other markets. So we need to also take account of the time of response in terms of flexibility of different types of storage. So whilst the hydrogen is going to fulfill the role of an energy storage with different purpose to that storage, deployment, but the batteries, to me, are going to, whether you know, we expect it more on the commercial C&I space or the residential, but we foresee residential batteries playing a big role, because, you know, it's a bit like, are we going to have ICE engines anymore? Well, EVs are going to dominate whether we like it or not, because they're going to be more affordable. So that storage element from batteries and EVs, it's how we unlock that potential. But no doubt on the role of hydrogen too. It's just for different purpose, perhaps, in terms of balancing and playing into the markets, as Alistair was saying before.
If I could just jump in, there are many different colours of hydrogen, and I probably lean towards those who would rather just go straight to green and don't want to get stuck on blue. I lean that way. There is space for others. Beyond, hydrogen is hydrogen, whatever colour you store it in the same way. Grid scale storage of hydrogen is not a massive technical challenge. It's very doable. Other things around storage, you're talking about 25 million electric vehicles, and when you work that out, that's a heck of a lot of storage.
Absolutely.
I'm aware of the vehicle-to-grid technologies that people are trialling. Again, you know, we're there too. We've been involved in that too. But actually, you almost don't need that. In fact, you don't absolutely need that, because vehicles charging and choosing when they charge already creates the storage you need to balance peaks and troughs, to make sure that things like Hinkley C, you have something to do overnight, even if it's windy and not terribly cold. And the volume there can absorb an awful lot. I would also have a little fondness for the idea that some of the other technologies, long-term storage technologies, might find a breakthrough application, which they don't have yet, and that's why they haven't got anywhere near getting down their cost curve. So the other technologies that don't get much of a look in, I wonder if emergency power might be the killer app for them when we finally realise that we need something other than standby diesels to fill that gap.
You're talking about things like liquid air and...
Well, actually not so much, because that's a bit of a big technology for that. But there are lots of different chemistries. So liquid air, I think of as more of a larger scale T-site kind of a application. I could be wrong about that. But there are other technologies out there, and if they can get through one particular niche, they will broaden out and they will improve the scope of storage that we can do. Thermal storage is bigger than you think. One thing that probably bothers me is that in the market that we've had up to now, we haven't been able to provide a business case for people like data center developers to include ice storage or phase change storage in their data centers. If that was distributed around that particular industry, you would have a heck of a lot of responsiveness without any lithium involved at all.
Interesting. So, Michael.
Just one thing to briefly add to that. I agree with all that's been said. You need to move from just shorter duration storage that you've got with lithium-ion batteries to the longer duration storages. But something that's been really interesting, which I've picked up from the COP26 discussions, is that longer duration storage, as Alistair said, is not doing well on the economics at the moment. It's not stacking up yet. However, there are lots of countries looking at it where they don't have a developed grid. And so it could be that longer duration storage takes off in other countries first where there isn't a developed grid, and then it moves over here once it's moved down the cost curve and you've got the economies of scale. So one to watch, I think.
Yeah, I think I would completely agree with that. Like, hydrogen, I think, can be a very good solution long term, but I don't think it's necessarily given. I think if we're thinking about using hydrogen for power flexibility, there's like sort of a lot of other things hydrogen can be doing in that time, and just the volumes of hydrogen we would need to provide that power flexibility is pretty enormous. And so yeah, but then it is a question then of if could anything else fill that gap, and if it doesn't, then hydrogen will have to. But yeah, I think long duration storage technologies. So we've seen kind of liquid air, but also kind of iron air batteries, which have the capability to get really, really cheap, but they just need to be deployed at scale to see if they can come down cheaply. Because I think the only way those kind of technologies will work is if they do become super, super cheap. Because we're with lithium ion, I think the reason why it's doing so well is because we've got this kind of external driver of that cost coming down. We've got electric vehicles being built, but also we've got technology that fits into what is being used today. So it's like quite high cycling. You're doing stuff every single day. You're generating value. Whereas if you're going to have a unit which is sat there for 2-3 weeks doing nothing, it's just kind of it's charged up. It's just waiting for a period to discharge. Then that the cost needs to be so much cheaper. And yeah, whether we get there, I'm not sure. But I don't think it's a given that hydrogen will.
I think
You've triggered Duncan there.
I think the thing I'm thinking is I find it utterly astounding that we're talking about in a few years' time that the whole of our gas grid runs on hydrogen. I mean, that is utterly amazing that change could happen, be it blue or be it green. But the reason I don't think batteries work is they have an important role. Don't get me wrong, in providing that fast flexibility that you need to keep the system running at 50 hertz and not digressing and falling over. It has a big role there. You do need some sort of zero carbon inertia to go along with it. But just look at the maths. I mean, you need so much lithium-ion cells to provide that amount of energy to step in. It has to be another source. It has to be something. And hydrogen seems to be the only thing that can do that, because you want the batteries there for feathering the system and a couple of hours storage, but it can't step in for 5 days.
Well,
5
times 24 hours times 10-20 gigawatts, that's a lot.
I'll just quickly say, I don't think I completely agree, building more and more lithium-ion storage is not going to be the answer. So yeah.
We've already heard that I think Alistair said there's going to be 20 to 25 million half-ton battery packs, we're giving about, each with about 50, I think this is the national grid, numbers 50 kilowatt hours of flex available at 7 kilowatts for each one. If you do the maths on that, you do get a pretty big number.
You do.
It is big.
You do. And
I think Duncan's point was about the 5-day time horizon.
It doesn't last long enough.
It doesn't last long enough.
There's plenty of power for a short duration, but it doesn't last so long. But the thermal storage is interesting though, because the big choice is with the domestics whether they use hydrogen for heating at home or whether they use heat pumps. And if they use heat pumps, that creates a lot of distributed demand-side management, which is extremely useful, extremely powerful, and you've got a lot of sort of thermal time switching that you can use in that system. So that creates a huge amount of flexibility. And it'd be interesting to see which of those scenarios comes out, which one of those two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I waved a flag earlier against an wider ADE point. We waved the flag for networked heat pumps. And one of the reasons we do that, not only because they can access ambient heat rather than really chilly winter day, snowy heat from an air source, but also because you can have the storage on the network in a bulkier, bigger way. It's quite cheap than having individual, storage in your house. Do you want a final comment on?
I just think that I picked up on what Alistair said before about the EVs and the fact that you may not need V2Gs, you can have all these masses of storage, but I think we, especially ADE, stakeholders should absolutely push and encourage the debate around dynamic tariffs. I think dynamic tariffs is going to absolutely be essential to move to enable that flexibility, which moves away from just shifting the peak problem to a later hour of the day. We need to have, when I say I believe in transactivity, it's exactly that, because if you have dynamic tariffs which are technology aided so that the consumer adheres to those without even feeling burdened by those, you're going to also be able to flex. You're going to be able to have different nodes that actually help each other trading, whether they've got excess flexibility, whether it's consumption that goes down, whether it's excess energy that goes on grid. But if you don't have dynamic tariffs really dig into what Alistair was saying, the half-hourly settlement has to become a thing. It has to come from, the market needs to get there, and we need to push for that to happen, because that will then allow the long-term storage to play its role, but also the short-term storage to actually really become a distributed form of flexibility in real time. There's not much debate on half-hourly tariffs. These agile tariffs which are enticing, and then you get to find out that consumers are actually not saving anywhere near what's advertised, because the technology just isn't there to help them do that.
No, it's a great point. We haven't, and in the AD we have a lot of challenger suppliers and indeed incumbent suppliers, the more progressive ones that are trying to offer this sort of dynamic tariff to domestic level to drive this, and we do quite a lot of work with them. They're not here on the panel because this is pure flex providers, but the suppliers are working. We're working quite hard with them to try and make that a viable offering for domestic consumers. Like you say, it will unlock quite a lot of capacity. Yes, that was the first question. Where's the flex coming from? We're not going to have time to do. We've got quite a few. We've got about 10 questions come in. We're going to have to pick one. I'm going to go for quite a techie one next. We've got, how do we keep a zero carbon system stable?
But that's
Alistair.
okay. So you've got the system operator not that long ago, but committed to zero carbon operation by 2025. They then, everyone shouted, "But where's your plan?" They then came out with a plan. They're now doing the plan, all the way from the IT to the contracts to the. There's lots of things in that. Among them are synchronous compensators, synchronous condensers, that help out with the geekier ends of stability around voltage management, around inertia, around fault level, and these things that only make sense to power engineers. And you go from there all the way out to active trading in markets. I'm not going to say it's not a challenge. It is a challenge, but it's one where the maps have been drawn and we're already marching. It is absolutely not the biggest puzzle now that we face. The previous question around long-term storage, that's a bigger puzzle. The hydrogen question, that's a huge puzzle. This one, I'm just going to do it.
Well, let's see if anyone might disagree with that. So Alistair's saying the ESO's nailed it. It's a done deal. Duncan.
I think there's a couple of things that need sorting out. First, and this is really quite techie, really. So hopefully I'll get this right. One is rock off, right? Rate of change of frequency on the system. So at 0.125 hertz, you're supposed to be at 50 hertz plus or minus 1%. You've got 4 seconds to fix a problem currently. Now the thing is we need to make long-term investments in kit that deals with inertia. So first of all, there isn't a market for inertia, and second, these are 30-year assets. So tell us please what the rock-off limits are going to be in 10, 20 years' time. The problem is, it's a really difficult problem for the system operator, because they don't know how well the market will evolve and how it will respond between using frequency and inertia to deal with this. So it's very difficult for them to set rock-off limits going into the future, which is needed for the investment. But more simply, we need a market for inertia. At the moment, energy and inertia are mixed together. So to manage the rock-off, it's a function of the frequency on the system and your largest in-field loss. So Hinkley, big system, if it falls off, the frequency will dump really quickly. So you need something to respond very, very quickly in order to deal with it. And what happens at the moment with the interconnectors overnight, they run them down to manage the rock-off limits, and they run them down and then bring on gas engines so that you've got more inertia. Now, the way to deal with, so what that does, it mixes up energy and inertia. You want a separate market for the two, and therefore people who want to invest in inertia can get a signal to decide how they're going to do it. At the moment, unless you get a long-term contract from the system operator, you don't know what your prices are going to be once that contract ends.
Plea for separate markets?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about the development of inertia markets. I mean, Grid, I think that at the moment of the tender rounds, they're offering 7-year contracts. And that would go some way to solving the problem in the immediate future. And then beyond that, you could see markets developing. So I'm kind of leaning towards Alistair's view, where we're kind of we know what the solution is, and we're
so
getting
there. What you
there.
do after your 7 years, you built this asset, unless you got your money back in 7 years, what are you going to do?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see how much spinning mass there is in the system. Now, if you use certain electronics with wind turbines, you can get spinning mass from that. The Whitetail project we're talking about will have a spinning mass. So I think that there might be enough spinning mass.
I hear different opinions from
Cool,
different
no,
engineers on that.
That's fine. That's good. That's why we've got these people are prepared to invest and build stuff on a 7-year contract.
I think I kind of partly agree with Evan, really. Like the ESO is being very progressive on kind of moving the market forward. It's quite clear by creating these markets, we will see solutions come through. I would say, like, on the inertia point, I think the focus has to be on the rock-off point, not necessarily on needing physical inertia, because then you come up with different solutions. It might be like kind of dedicated, like, flywheels or synchronous condensers, but we could also see, grid-forming inverters come through, like using the power electronics capability, which really it is there. It's just it's not being used right now. So as long as kind of these different technologies can compete, then we'll get the best solution, and I think we'll get there quicker.
Yes. Wow, we've gone into pretty geeky stuff. Synchronous condensers.
I'm more agreeable with what has just been said. I think we're going to have a power electronics dominated grid, and I think that as well as...
So that's synthetic inertia?
Absolutely, synthetic inertia, and I think that as well as having a need for a market for inertia, I think, sounding like a broken record again, I think we can't ignore the distribution network now playing an active role.
Absolutely.
So far it's been clearly due to the non-decentralized system. We had this transmission network that played the role, and that was where it ended. We need to absolutely believe into the possibility of this reverse bottom-up approach, where the synthetic inertia coming from the distribution network, it's a matter of where is the technology that is going to do it in inertial timescale. Well, we believe that smart transformer that we've developed is definitely going to do it. Whether it's going to be the unique technology, I hope so, but I'm a firm believer that the distribution network is the one that is going to help balance the system, and synthetic inertia is the thing.
But some massive, massive changes need to be made on the distribution side, because it's kind of like clunky 1950s technology, as you were saying.
Yeah.
You can't see what the hell's going on because it's not.
But
you can with the Ampex
probe. You can with the smart transformer. It's actually a drop-in replacement within existing substation, which is a massive, again, hurdle otherwise to be overcome, because the distribution network operator aren't going to build new substations to accommodate new technology. They don't want to retrofit because downtime is expensive. So it's a matter of devising technology which is fit for purpose, but also fit for, future-proofing the system is about seeing what the problem is even ahead of time. We need sensors, we need to see what's going on, but we also need to harness that synthetic inertia in the timescales that are needed for flexibility.
In your presentation, you had, was it 10% penetration for smart?
Well, if just thinking of 10% penetration of the distribution grid with smart transformers, you get to, the equivalent of today probably 6 to 10 CCGTs, depending on power rating. It's inertial timescales that, again, is what's needed for balancing. So I do believe that it's a matter of also been brave enough from a network operator's point of view to innovate and to embrace the technology. And where is the regulator playing a role there? Is Ofgem needs to encourage the DNOs embracing and adopting technology and providers
Ofgem,
like
are you
us.
listening?
Ofgem, are you listening?
Ofgem, are you
Yes.
The question I have with that, though, is how much more interaction will there need to be between the ESO and
Yes.
the DNOs? I mean, if we can't see at the moment, can the ESO see? How will they be able to see if
That
we've
is
got
a
power
really-
electronics?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, I mean, there's so much going on down in the DNO system. So sort of somewhere between 7 to 30 gigawatts by 2050 of embedded solar at domestics, most of whom are going to have batteries because there'll be so much utility scale solar that the price of electricity at noon is going to be zero with that much solar on the system. You've got smart EVs and V2G, which gives you sort of 25 going down to 12, coming out the other way, and then potentially also you've got something like 50 gigawatts of domestic heating going on as well. So that's a vast amount of flexibility. And at the moment, what you've got is, okay, we're moving away from this with the charging review that's going on. You've got red, green and amber rates, which are really clunky, set for 3 years. And now we're talking about demand-dominated areas and generation-dominated areas, but what we haven't said is over what time period. Are we talking about a season? Are we talking about a day? Are we talking about an hour?
Yes.
You know, and what you could have in the end is actually almost sort of subnodal prices. Ofgem's analysis was around 800 about 132 kV bulk supply points, but you could have a whole series of separate marketplaces, 800 or even more nodal marketplaces for energy. At the moment, we've got one for the whole of the UK. You could have several hundred, several thousand of them, and maybe also something around inertia in each market as well.
Are you
Just goes to show the scale of what will have to change.
Are you plumbed into the Ofgem full chain flexibility work?
Not personally, no.
They could do with hearing some of this,
Yes.
and they are open to it. They know it's a big challenge.
It is, and it's a challenge for all of us, really, to make these things happen. We can't do it in isolation. We need to work together
Absolutely.
to solve these problems.
But we've got some of the solutions here. We've only probably got time for one more question, actually. We've got quite a few. Might do two because this one might miss the point. But we haven't got a representative of pure domestic flex here. But as flex providers active in the market, how big do you think it's going to be? How can we make sure that it works? It's intelligible and appealing to the domestic customer.
How did you say you've not got domestic?
Okay.
I mean, I've been talking about how important that residential flex is. I think the biggest hurdle is to make sure that the consumer has it absolutely easy to embrace and doesn't feel that it's being overtaken by the technology itself. So we've developed this user-centric approach where the user is actually catered for in his preferences, but he can always be in control, he can override, and he has to be absolutely seamless in managing it for the consumers. It's a bit like the mobile phone. You just sign up to a contract, you're given your mobile phone, you don't have to worry about anything else. You got access to service. So it's energy as a service, but with
how
user
big do you think it's going to be? What's Alice going to unlock for us then?
Well, you've seen my stats at the beginning of the presentation. I mean, 20 gigawatts of currently monetizable flex across Europe, and that's actually 10% of all the DR. So it's going to play a massive role. I don't want to put a number on it, but I think it's a need for us to believe that residential flex has to play a role. So.
Yeah. I think it's going to be, the question on the heat side is how many homes get heat pumps, because that's where the flexibility at domestic scale is going to be for on the heating side. Where district energy is the solution, then clearly the flexibility happens at the energy centre, and that's fine. And you can make a similar argument about hydrogen and electrolyzers. So that's a policy question. How big is it? Is how big is the heat pump sector going to be? On electric vehicles, it's going to be about the size of the number of homes that have driveways. It's about that
Correct.
big. Now, what is that, 10 million? So
about half, I think.
yeah, so I think there is a real question that needs to be answered, probably by the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, and it's not as if they're ignoring this question. They know all about it, which is people who park on street. And if you park on street, you've got, even if you electrify every lamppost or whatever it is that you do, or put these little curb-mounted things, there's more contention for charging. And if there's more contention for charging, there's less flexibility or less tolerance by the users for being flexed. And that could mean that the networks, I mean, lamppost electricity supplies are not beefy. And so there could be less ability for those to flex, and therefore more stress on those networks, as opposed to the actual ones that feed the homes, where flexibility is absolutely, I think, going to be the default. I think that anybody who has an EV charge point in their home is going to hook up with something that's to do with flexibility. I think that from our point of view, we won't do the same thing that Irene is describing. We will the interface with the user. We have partner organisations that will do that because they specialise in that. They know how to work an app. They know how to do settlement. They know how to incentivise, reward, engage. We are in the background. Our expertise is in looking at the flexibility that's there and monetising it. We face the industry, not the consumer. And that division of labour, if you like, is quite important to us, because it means that that bit gets done right without us having to become experts in it. But as to the size, EV size is the size of the number of homes with driveways. I think no smaller.
That's right. I mean, the low-hanging fruit is electric vehicles and the heat pumps, and the business models need to deal with that. And it's channels to market that's the issue there, I think.
Yeah, and I think I would quite strongly agree with Verena that a lot of what you sort of need to build is just that trust from the consumer. Like,
Yes.
We've seen it with the sort of vehicle to grid project that, you know, people don't want to see like the fanciest possible optimization you come up with what an electric vehicle can do when it's plugged in from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. in the morning. They just want to kind of see it doing what they think is best.
Yes.
And that is kind of most important there. I mean, if we go back a very long way in the history of open energy, it started with the idea of using domestic refrigeration to provide frequency response. That is literally where, well, it's not even open energy, RL Tech started from. And that, you know, in theory, that's a good idea. That's something that some very smart person came up with. But it hits that point of people don't want their fridges turning on and off. And this was literally a newspaper article, I think maybe like 2008. It was talking about Big Brother fridges. Yeah. And instantly that killed that entire thing. And so it's all about the building up that trust. So consumers actually, are happy having things in their homes.
Just have a
make decisions.
final question. So we've only got a few seconds left, but you're close to this. What do you think, Irene, the biggest hurdle is to unlocking behind the meter?
If we, for a minute, put on the side consumer trust, which is possible to be overcome, it's open standard. We need appliances to have open standard protocol. We know BASE is working on public specifications, availability across different devices. We just need to become technology agnostic. We can't have platforms that need bipartisan agreements with OEMs, because that would limit which users, which consumers are going to be able to provide flex, because you are only going to do it with certain brands of certain things. You need to be able to have open standard approach.
So we're not wasting our time with the ADE on this PAS 1879.
So I agree, we need regulatory stability so people can invest with confidence.
And that's at a domestic level, and I think perhaps at your level as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, that's an excellent comment. I've got to wind it up now because we've only got 1 minute left. I wish we'd had longer, actually. Maybe we learned a lot. We had our Flex Ed from a wide range of operators there, and for the first hour, and then a really interesting exchange about flex and all its forms, from various colours of hydrogen to electric vehicles and domestic houses, really getting unlocked. It's quite exciting. It's a massive growing market. I'm quite excited by sitting and listening to you all. I hope the viewers at home, and obviously Ofgem particularly, there's a few shout outs to you there, and the Dinos and your DSO friends were listening. But now I've got to close this because it is Remembrance Day, Armistice Day, and at 11 o'clock, so in a minute's time, we'll be observing a minute's silence. So in order for you to be able to do that at home, we'll shut down the broadcast now. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panel.
Thank you.
Thanks.